Hey everybody, welcome back to the Seinfeld podcast. Craig Schaub here with Laura Kessel. Chris is actually off this week. He's having some Wi-Fi issues. So Laura, it's just you and I here. How are you doing?
Good. You could talk about Chris now.
Yeah, no, we can badmouth him here, huh? Well, we're talking about the wallet, and this is a good episode. I don't know if I'd say it's like really great or bad or anything like that. It's just kind of a good middle of the road, solid Seinfeld episode with some really good moments, I think.
Yes, I agree.
What were your overall impressions before we kind of deep dive into it?
It's funny because there's a bunch of moments, like you said, that are like legendary, like with Kramer's hair catching on fire and that dance that they do at the door when Elaine comes back.
Yeah.
It's just there's so much in here, but it's not tremendously important.
Right. Yeah, in the episode, it's actually the first part of another two-part series, although this one was separated, and obviously you get the to be continued thing, which Jerry actually kind of makes fun of in his comedy bit when he's on the stage. But yeah, you're right. There are some really fun moments. Kramer with the Cuban cigar lighting himself on fire, essentially. There's some pretty good physical comedy. And I will say, really a standout maybe in this episode is really the crux of it, which is Jerry's mom and dad are coming up from Florida to so Morty can see a back specialist, which I guess they don't have back specialists in Florida where you could just drive down the street and have someone check out your back. You got to go all the way back to New York City to do that. But I'm sure Morty probably is one of those types of guys that he has his doctors that he's had for 50 years and he doesn't want to stop going to them. So I get that. I can sympathize with it. But in this case, the mystery at hand is Morty's wallet. This is the wallet episode. Morty's wallet is missing from his pants as he's getting x-rays. He goes out of the room and leaves his stuff there, and his wallet turns up missing. And this is a really good episode to kind of showcase Morty Seinfeld's anxiety about life in general and his, assumptions about everybody stealing from him and things going wrong and blaming everybody. And, this was a really good episode for Morty's, character to really get sink your teeth into Morty Seinfeld type of stuff. What do you think about Morty Seinfeld here?
He's great in this episode. I wrote, that he's my spirit animal in the doctor's office.
Yeah.
I have very similar pet peeves to Morty in the doctor's office. I cannot stand when they take you into that room and leave you sitting there, and it might be part of it is, the current doctor that I have, she's always late.
Okay. Yeah.
She's always running behind. And the last two times I went, I went to the desk and they're like, oh, she's running 45 minutes behind.
Wow.
And I was like, would it be okay if I went and got a drink? Because I was like, I could get like a pop or a coffee or something. She's like, well, if you leave and she gets, decides to call you, we can't hold your place. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, so you're held hostage.
Yeah. Exactly. So basically you couldn't bother to call me and tell me she was running almost an hour late, but I have to sit here and wait for her, Yeah. So, I totally get it.
And not very fair that they're holding you hostage because you could literally get called in right after you leave. And then of course your place isn't held. And that's just not fair when they tell you 45 minutes is probably going to be the wait. But of course they say that with the idea that you might get called back. So that's not really very fun.
It's like a Seinfeld episode.
Yeah, and I agree with you here on Morty with being the spirit animal, because we've all been there where you go to the doctor's office, you have an appointment to keep, and then they don't keep their appointment, their time. Yeah. And I get some things run late, and you get things happen, but he was sitting around there for like 20 minutes, just kind of waiting and waiting and waiting, and then the doctor doesn't even do anything with him. It's the nurse that comes in and says, okay, let's go get your x-rays or whatever. Yeah. And so the comedy sort of ensues there with him. This is also, I think you mentioned it last week. This is, Elaine is back full time here after Julia Louis-Dreyfus's maternity leave, which is awesome. So I think that's why there was a extra level of excitement maybe when she does, barge through that door. And there's a really good, the fun physical comedy with Kramer, because we know Elaine likes to push people when she gets kind of
Yes.
super excited, and she kind of starts getting riled up, and then she pushes Kramer, which of course Kramer really embellishes when she pushes him. So it's just kind of a fun moment, and it's an iconic moment where they're all dancing around with each other and extremely happy, and they give her like a little shout out about how great she looks, and that felt like a really authentic moment as opposed to a staged show character moment. It really felt nice to them welcome her back to this cast because she's super important to it.
Yeah. And she I mean, it was like it just like revved up the scene when she walked in too, because I mean the first thing out of her mouth was a joke, about the sofa, that he had to assert his back on the sofa.
Yes. It's a nice
And
callback. Yeah.
oh man. Yeah. That damn sofa.
Yeah. And of course, Morty and Morty and Helen get into sort of a verbal sparring match at the doctor's office about, you would defend that like you defend that sofa bed like it's your kid, basically. Basically would defend it more, which is kind of a funny thing too. But he never really. I mean, I guess I can remember him maybe complaining about how uncomfortable it is when they stay there, but. It's funny how the mom is always like the eternal optimist about everything, whether it's in this case another iconic moment like Jerry's a good boy, like how could someone not like Jerry, kind of thing.
You're a wonderful boy.
Yeah, and of course his dad's like, well, I could see how people wouldn't like him. So it's kind of they're a very good pair together. I think Morty and Helen are very good together.
I agree.
This is a sort of an episode that George, is in, and this is sort of the burgeoning romance with he and Susan. So we met Susan before in the previous episodes with, the NBC executives as Jerry and George are trying to pitch the show about nothing, and George has kind of taken a liking to Susan, and they begin this romance. And of course, while they're on this date, he's getting ready to go home or whatever, and he basically says that we're not interested in the $13,000 deal. So this is the continuation of the pitch episode and in the ticket episode as well. So we're kind of a really free-flowing, like 4-episode almost, once the episode next week is over, like a 4-episode spot. But George, not really a whole lot to do in this episode other than just kind of say no to Susan and kind of try to explain to Jerry that they're negotiating, even though Jerry doesn't think of it that way, and we'll find out more so that it's not really a negotiation when you say no to a network. So kind of not a lot of George in this one, but we've seen episodes here in the last few weeks that George has been pretty prevalent in. I mean, what did you make of George's character arc here in this episode?
I mean, I'm not a huge George fan,
right?
So kind of I didn't mind, but he did have some good moments, like just out of the blue, like he was when they were talking, Jerry and Elaine were talking about the face and all that. He was eating the peanut butter with his fingers, and that was there was a moment there. I'm like, he's like, what am I? I'm off bread. You ever heard of a spoon? Standing right in the damn kitchen, have a spoon. But I mean, he did, there wasn't really a lot necessarily for him to do here, but that's okay. At least they didn't leave him out like the one time when he almost quit. So
yeah, that's true. That is true. And obviously, he does have some funny moments, as you said, with the peanut butter. And, of course, he got nervous when Susan gave him the Cuban cigars to kind of like thank him for, whatever. And then, of course, he's like, what do I need to write a letter? And she's like, of course, that'd be great. And he's like, well, what do I write? And she's like, well, you're the writer. And of course, he's not a writer, but he's trying to play that he's a writer and say that he is. Usually George, when he makes up a career profession, he's usually pretty on the ball with his deceit. Here, as a writer, he's very nervous and anxious about not letting it slip that he's not actually a real writer, because of course, they sold him as a writer when they were pitching the story idea to NBC, and now he's a little nervous about what to write. He doesn't want to mess up.
Yeah, I wrote down somewhere in my notes about him that I've known a few people not quite as bad as him, but like I wrote down, where does he get this confidence that he has? Because it doesn't, we don't know everything about him, but he certainly didn't get it at home from his parents.
Right.
And he doesn't seem to have done anything in his life to have given him this level of confidence, as a natural thing. But he just, nothing bugs him,
Yeah.
In some ways, I guess that's probably an admirable trait,
Right.
But I would think some of the, some qualities in a person should make them, have the realization of who they are, because he's just, he even says, he brings up the Ted, again, with the Ted Danson,
Ted Danson's obsessed, yeah.
To Susan. And it was kind of refreshing to see Susan, who has, made deals with Ted Danson seemingly, with a laugh that you're not Ted Danson,
Right, right.
Just to bring him up. Good Lord. Bring up Blossom,
Yeah. Yeah. I do kind of agree with you there on how George is so. Sometimes he can come across like he's scared of his own shadow, and he's very like just in his own head about things. And then other times, when he's an architect or a marine biologist, he comes across as being the most confident person in the world, and you wonder how he can. I wouldn't say turn it on and turn it off, but it kind of is like he's turning it on and turning it off, because one minute he can be as suave and sophisticated as he needs to be, and then the next minute he can't bear to talk to a woman, or gets so frightened at the idea that a beautiful woman might be interested in him or something. So it's very strange. And I think this case, it's maybe this is, I don't know if this was the first time that George had sort of lied about his profession, but it seems like it might have been, and maybe that's the confidence builder that he needed to, I can fake it till I make it type. And I think I kind of wonder too, like with how neurotic he kind of is, like maybe that helps him be deceitful and helps him like believe in what he's saying is true, because maybe that's like how he just envisions things, and just, whether it manifests as happening or not, he just believes that it's happened, or believes in his own, doesn't take things so seriously, that maybe he doesn't think that lying is a big issue, or, being deceitful to friends or workers or whatever is a big deal. But I don't know. You're kind of right. He's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of character at times.
Yeah. It's just like you want to shake him by his shoulders and be like, what are you doing? What is your problem?
Yeah.
They get into the little argue back and forth argument sort of in Jerry's apartment, where he's like, oh, I'm so scared, and
Right.
it just, it just, there's no logic there,
Yeah, when the reality is that he should be scared, because this is not that it's his meal ticket, but this is like a chance for him to like get a little bit of money. He's got no job. Like I think Jerry's mom and dad said about him, when they're in the car ride from the airport, George was like going to say no to the deal, or didn't think it was enough. And, of course, Jerry's mom's like, he doesn't even work. So it's kind of, you kind of wonder, I think to some degree, like, wouldn't George be the opposite, where Jerry would be a little bit more nonchalant and be like, no, that's not enough. But then George would be like, yes, we have to take it, even if it's like $5, because I have no money. I have no prospects. I have no career or future to speak of.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is mostly it's Jerry's in this early on. Of course, he gets into the fight with his mom and dad about paying. I can't even remember what it was for, like
gas.
Gas, that's right, gas, yeah. So paying for the gas, and of course, his dad's like insisting on paying for gas. He's like, "It's my car. I'll pay for my own gas." This is not really a lot for Jerry to do other than just kind of be a side character and, you know, be available for a wisecrack here and there and, things like that. So he didn't really have a lot of, I don't know. Did anything stand out to you with him? He didn't really seem very memorable in this episode, but I don't know what you think about him in this episode.
No, he gets more in the second half, like, when he gets into the big thing with George, when he tells him that he passed,
Yeah.
he gets far more far more active in that
Right.
one.
Yeah.
He I mean, he's a good straight man for, for the conflict that's going on around him,
Right. Yeah.
With
never gets too high, never gets too low. He's not demonstrative like George. He's not, over the top like George and Elaine and Kramer can all get. He does play a vital role though here because his mom and dad are in town. He doesn't have his watch on, a watch that they gave him as a present. He threw the watch away in the last episode because it was running slow when they were coming back to New York and getting another meeting with NBC. So he throws it away. And then, of course, Uncle Leo was able to find the watch in the dumpster. Uncle Leo gets the watch fixed. When Jerry's mom and dad come to visit, they wonder where his watch is. He makes up the story about how it wasn't working and he had to go get it fixed. And, of course, 20 questions ensue, and Kramer's involved in it because, of course, Kramer's next door to see the parents. And, Kramer's like, exactly knows where Jerry, because Jerry just not that he made up a location, but he's like, oh, Columbus and 85th Street or whatever. And of course, Kramer knows the store that's the owner of that store, and he's like, oh, I can go down there for you and get it get squared away. And I do like the fact that they played up Kramer's concussion that he had, so they kind of finish up that storyline. So we get Kramer with the hair on fire, and then, of course, the bandage on his head, and Helen's asking him what that is, and they give this whole story about Joe Davola, and it goes into how could anybody hate Jerry, so that kind of comes full circle. But then what really comes full circle, and will end up coming into play in the next episode, is Uncle Leo goes to dinner with Jerry, Helen, and Morty, and, of course, he was the man who gave Morty the recommendation for the back doctor, and he kind of comes in all gruff as it is because, apparently, Morty was really insistent that they stole his wallet at the doctor's office. So he's mad because he thinks Morty's burning a bridge with him and that family and knowing them. And they get into a big spat at the dinner table. And of course, Uncle Leo's wearing the watch and they notice it. And we kind of get now into the next episode that will happen. Overall, I think this was a good episode. Like I said, it's probably closer to the upper middle of the road than it is in the back half of Seinfeld episodes. Nothing overly spectacular, but some fun moments, some iconic moments, as you said. And overall, just a nice, solid Seinfeld episode for me.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Yeah. There's a couple things that struck me as either odd or curious in this episode. One was I couldn't figure out, I mean, nobody can, but how did Kramer actually catch the back of his hair on fire?
They never really,
when last you see him, he's like this.
Yeah.
And the flame is like here.
Yeah.
And it just, it's so funny, because it's totally Kramer. If anyone's going to catch their hair on fire in this show, it's going to be Kramer.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing, going back to the doctor's office again, did you find it odd that both times that Mr. Seinfeld was yelling, his wife came to the door?
I actually glad you brought that up. That was one part that I actually kind of forgot about that I wanted to bring up was that, like, I don't know about you, but when I go to doctor's appointments or my wife goes to doctor's appointments, we both try to go to each other's appointments just to be there and, make sure everything's going well and everything like that. And, so, Helen's there. She's at the doctor's office with him. And she's very close by, apparently, because every time he hollers out the hallway that his wallet was stolen, or asking for someone to please help him after being in there for 20 minutes. She comes right to the door
Yeah.
and is there. So yeah, that's, I think
She
those
has
are a
like she has
couple of
like total free movement in this office,
yes. So yeah, maybe there were a couple of things, that and the hair on fire, that maybe didn't make sense but were fun moments.
Yeah.
Anything else that stands out to you, or that maybe we didn't talk about yet, that you
The
wanted to
other
bring
thing
up?
was, what did you think of the two doctors in this episode? um the back doctor, he just like completely walks away. He's like, okay, and he just turns around and leaves with the x-rays.
Well, I
There's no
mean,
diagnosis.
well, he wanted to give the diagnosis to Morty, but then Morty was like, I don't care about the diagnosis. I want to know who stole my wallet. And I think after that, he's like, hey, if you're going to
And then he
accuse
just
me of
left.
stealing your wallet, I'm just going to leave.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened.
Yeah. And then of course the psychiatrist, who's like a complete
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we get bits and pieces of him here. I mean, we get this one more extended scene, I guess, with Elaine, where he's asking, I'm assuming he's kind of asking about why she's no longer with him or whatever, and it's that she's met a new man. And of course, she, for whatever, now this is what I don't understand though. Why was she named Kramer, knowing that you're probably going to have to like stage something? Wouldn't it be easier to stage something with the guy that you've actually been with before, in Jerry, instead of Kramer, where
Yeah.
Kramer, every time he gets involved in something, things just roll off the track, and all hell breaks loose sometimes.
The one thing about the name was, I thought to myself, well, maybe it's because she probably talked about Jerry during her
Well, that's true too.
treatment. But the thing that drove me nuts about this is, didn't they just get back from this romantic trip?
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden she's like, I met somebody, we started talking, and we're back together. What was it, like a day later?
Yeah. Timing's probably never the strong suit of a lot of sitcoms. And in here, as a plot device, they needed to, either end that storyline or keep Elaine, free from being bogged down with Dr. Reston now that she's back from maternity leave. So yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense in timing, but that's not uncommon, I think, for a lot of sitcoms, and especially even the best ones out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, this episode was good. The next one is very good, I think, just because I mean, everybody knows what's coming, but I mean, just because I know what's coming, and it's like lunacy,
Yeah. Well, yeah, and now we're getting into the next episode. We'll talk about it next week, where Jerry, it's the watch. So the episode, this again, like I said, this is kind of like a 4-parter almost.
Yeah.
Creating a little narrative here, a little story. So Jerry tries to buy his watch back from Uncle Leo. And, as you said, there's a lot going on in this episode. And of course, Kramer has to pretend to be Elaine's boyfriend to fool her therapist, which, again, it probably goes back to does she really need to do that? Couldn't she just say, I don't want to be with you? She's, Elaine's usually pretty strong with that, where if she doesn't want to be with you, she's going to get rid of you.
Yeah.
So she probably, could just be normal Elaine and just say, I don't want to be with you. I'm, independent. I don't really want you. So, But then she also meets up with crazy Joe Davola as well. So she meets Joe Davola in this episode, and kind of an interesting situation here. And George, of course, is negotiating with NBC for Jerry's sitcom. So it could be kind of interesting to watch this kind of tie up some of those loose ends in the narrative that we've seen here over the last 3 episodes.
And of course, the first step of the Kramer Susan meeting takes place in the next episode.
Yes.
Which is worth the price of admission.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it seems like it's been a while, and maybe it's just me, but I do remember now in this episode that Jerry actually has a love interest. I mean, it seems like it's either he has one for every episode, or there are some stretches where he kind of goes without someone to date, So in this case, he does have a new woman that will, be a sort of I'm pretty sure a one-off kind of dating situation, but we will see. Any final thoughts here on The Wallet?
Not really.
All right. Like I said, solid episode. We will finally finish up this really 4-part series of episodes, culminating with The Watch next week. For Laura, this is Craig. We'll see Chris next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Mooney. Welcome to what is our new Hope Interrupted podcast based on the work from our book, Hope Interrupted, that I co-authored with my good friend Byron McCauley.
Hey, Jennifer, I'm looking forward to this podcast as much as I was looking forward to writing this book with you. We hope to interview some high impact folks as well as have a little fun.
We're going to cover stories of hope. To learn more about our podcast and our book, please visit www.hopeinterrupted.com.